Maybe, not sure. And how about like to focus on learning instead? Maybe. All right. And how about respond with emoji? Just like you put like a smiling face or some picture to respond. For example, the teacher asks you a question on the message and just give him an emoji, right? A smiling face. Do you think it's okay with it? I don't know. And probably just like to deny chance to learn online. Probably different people have different kind of ideas about this one. And how about like to be inspired from online videos? Yeah, so for some people, they probably will try to refresh themselves to be inspired by the video on the internet, okay? So, here's going to be what I'm going to tell you. So for example, if you think to ignore all the messages is good, we can say to ignore all the messages is good, right? And to connect with real people is important, or to connect with the real people is necessary. So do you know the word necessary? Necessary, which means something you really need and something you should do. Okay, there will be something really necessary. And to focus on learning, probably think is not important, right? So you can say to focus on learning is not important, right? Or to respond with emoji is polite or is acceptable, okay? It depends on different kind of ideas, right? So now, what I'm going to do is that I would like you to listen to my sentence carefully. So it will be, so 10 fingers. So it's going to be, it is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Just listen. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Which words are stronger? It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Probably the first part will be necessary, right? Necessary, right? And how about the other part? Ignore, right? So our focus will be something necessary, and we should ignore that, right? So we'll put our stress on necessary and ignore. Okay, so let's try to read with me. Okay, so show me your finger. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's do it again. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's do it again.
It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages.
Okay, messages. Okay, let's do it again.
It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages.
Okay, but it's kind of too long, so just make it to 5. Okay, it is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's just make it into 5. Okay, it is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's just listen. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's do it again. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. Okay, so show me your finger. Let's read again. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for Tim to ignore all the messages. So we want to highlight necessary, right? And also to ignore, okay? So let's do this one. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. Just look at me. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. Let's do it again. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. Okay, so would you do this with me? Like it is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's do it again. All the messages.
All the messages.
All the messages.
All the messages.
To ignore 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 all the messages.
For a team.
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 For a team to ignore all the messages.
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 Necessary.
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 Necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
Necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
Necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
Necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
Beautiful. So now let's show me your finger. Okay, let's read this one. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. Okay, it is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. Okay, let's start.
It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. It is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages.
Lovely. So that's roughly about the sentence that we're going to talk about today. So we can take a look at the sentence here. Your beautiful paintings. Maybe you can show a picture to your art teachers and to see what would they was will be crazy about this. So let's think about the sentence. What is necessary? What is necessary? Necessary means something you should do, right? So in this sentence, it's necessary for a team to ignore all the messages. So what is necessary to do? To ignore all the messages. Okay, so what is necessary? To ignore all the messages. For whom? For a team, right? So we said for a team, it is necessary to ignore all the messages, right? So that's roughly about this one. Let's take a look at this one. So it is necessary for a team to ignore all the messages, right? So for this sentence, we can see it is right here, right? And then necessary here is the adjective, okay? And for someone, and then to do something, okay? And we can take a look at another example here. It is important for Tom to connect with real people. It is important for Tom to connect with real people. It is important for Tom to connect with real people. So which two words are stronger? Yeah, here we have important, right? And connect, right? So could you read the sentence with us? It is important.
It is important
For Tom to with real people. Okay, that's the first. It is important for Tom to connect with real people. It is important for Tom to connect with real people. It is important for Tom to connect with real people. So let's repeat the sentence. It is let's look at it is
important for Tom to connect with real people.
let's look at it is.
It is important for Tom to connect with real people.
So we also have it is, right? And here we have the adjective here. And also for someone, and then to do something, okay? And also if you want to make it even stronger, say very meaningful, very meaningful. So you can say, it is very meaningful for Cindy to focus on learning. It is very meaningful for Cindy to focus on learning. It is very meaningful for Cindy to focus on learning. It is very meaningful for Cindy to focus on learning. So which words are stronger? It is very meaningful for Cindy to focus on learning. It is very meaningful for Cindy to focus on learning.